Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. How are you? Thank you so much for making the time this morning. I'm so excited to share with you this content as part of our parent education work at Evolved Education Company. We have Samantha Chow here who's going to produce today's webinar. So I'm just going to kind of sit back and allow her to have the floor. And if you have any questions, you can put them into the Q&A or the chat, which I'll be monitoring, and we can get to them at the end. Some of you had actually submitted your questions ahead of time, so we'll be sure to address those towards the end of the time today. Okay. All right. I'm going to hand it over. Sorry, Sam. We can't get Sam's video to work. So you're seeing Sam's lovely photo. I promise that's how she does. We'll let her have at it. Okay. Sounds good, everyone. Go ahead.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you again for joining us. I am going to be an invisible voice here. So today's focus is supporting early writers. So here, talking about early writers, I'm really covering children from pre-K to 2nd grade. So here at Evolved, our mission is always to ensure your child learns well. And it is a big key part of it is helping you understand your child and how to really best support them and meet them where they're at. So today, I hope that by the end of the webinar, you will leave with a reminder that writing is complex. It is hard. Whenever you're working with kids, always put your beginner's mind hat on and try to empathize how hard this activity is for our young kiddies. And second, that I hope you kind of take away some practical tips that you can implement straight away. So if you would allow yourself to just turn off all your distractions and give me about 20-25 minutes of your time, we would greatly appreciate it. So I like to think of writing as a juggling act. There are so many balls up in the air for us. Because we as grown-ups have come a long way, it might just seem a lot easier for us. So it's important to step back and look at all the different components that we have. So one of the first things you need to think about is visual and motor coordination. So this is referring to the actual handwritten part of writing. So for our youngest early writers, they're just still mastering how to form the letters. So that's taking a lot of energy, or what we term as cognitive load. Then there's also the idea of letter sound correspondence and spelling. So kids are learning that the sound that they make, a letter, can then be transcribed into actual letters that then string into words and then eventually into longer sentences. On top of that, they have to think of ideas of what they actually want to write and need to write. So they need to hold all of that in while they're figuring out the motions and all the sounds, correct spelling patterns. Then on top of that, they need to think about all the writing conventions like punctuation, remembering to start with a capital letter. You know, who am I writing to? Like, is this a story? Is this a narrative? So there are a lot of different text types that they will eventually encounter. And then they also just need to pay attention to the task at hand. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. And when we start with our young kids, we often, again, forget about all of this. So I know we have a question that I'll address later, that sometimes we'll see young kids writing and be like, oh no, they turned that letter around. Oh, they spelled that incorrectly. Oh, they forgot the capital letter or uppercase. So it's just a reminder for us that this is a huge juggling act for our young early writers. Now, to show you how hard it is, I have a short video of one of my students back in the classroom, and you can see all the stuff that's going on here. So I just want to show you so you can get a reminder and appreciation of what's going on. So this is him just writing a simple sentence that I watched Power Rangers, but just see how the process unfolds. So you can see in this short piece how much this child is trying to, keep in his mind. First, he's trying to focus on the actual letter formation. Then he was also trying to keep up, like, what am I trying to write? So you see him go back over to the beginning of the sentence and start rereading. Then he also has a lot of the noise that the competing noise in the background. And I am going to try to see if I can improve my connection right now, as I hear the audio is a little. Mary, is it a little better or not? If you could give me a thumbs up.
It's a little better. It's actually not, we can still hear you. It's just a little cracky here and there, but if you do your best, if we're still getting you.
All right, okay.
I hear it a little cracky now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Type of that. So as again was saying, that there's a lot going on here. So for our young writers, I would suggest the first thing to start with if they're not at that process of starting to write letters is to begin with dictation. As parents, the first thing you can do is show them what it means to write, because they can't do it yet. First, they really need to connect that writing is about connecting the sounds to words on paper. So you can do that for them by, having them say things to you about like a picture that they drew and then writing it down. And as you do that, model to them, like think out loud. Oh, I am writing the word cat, and really stretch it out for them and sound out and say to yourself, oh, I can hear that sound, and then show them what letter you're writing. And also vary up the types of writing you do with your child. That in your daily life, you'll go and perhaps to the store and say to them, let's write a shopping list together. And that shows them that writing a shopping list will be different to perhaps writing a fairy tale story that they've made up. So some practical ideas, like after going on a trip, like Memorial Day weekend's coming up, you can have your child sit down and recount some of their favorite things that they did and actually write it down with them. But be very intentional, keep the sentences short, and have them watch you put like your finger space in between words and the period at the end, and make sure you write really not neatly, like print to them, and really just be a model writer. And other things that we do a lot is just having those conversations with kids about what's your favorite part of the book or movie. But go that next step again, write that down. You can also, I'm sure you have a million pictures that your kids have drawn. Maybe choose like one at the end of the day and have them tell you about it and just write a nice sentence. Again, shopping lists, to-do lists, just varying the different writing that you do with your child. And again, modeling that self-talk is so important. It might sound silly sometimes, but just talk out loud thinking process. Like, I need to put a space between these two words. What sound do I hear? Okay, I know that that's the letter M. So these are practical things that you can do just every day. Just spend a few minutes, and sometimes it can be, what you think is like going to be a short task might be a little longer, but that's okay. Be intentional and be patient, and just think of it as a real quality time with your kids. So in the classroom, you might see this often for our earliest writers, where they're just really doing more drawings, and they can start sort of writing their names. Teachers would just, quickly ask them like, oh, what did you do here? And you can see that here, the sentences aren't complete, but it's okay. This is at the very beginning stage. They're just the teacher's just transcribing exactly what the child is saying. But further on, I would suggest you model like a fuller sentence, like, oh, this dog is black and white. He has a happy face. So you can gradually help your child, rephrase those sentences and model to them like good, simple sentences. We just talked about the early writers and how difficult handwriting is. And I'm really focusing here the handwriting piece because often I've had students who are stuck because they have ideas, they just can't get it out because they can't, they're just finding the handwriting so difficult. And often I think that in the classroom, we're not given enough time to work on handwriting and connecting it to the reading. And this is just a few sort of the academic stuff to show you guys that handwriting is really important in terms of brain development. So psychologists and neuroscientists have shown through brain scans that when children start writing during those letter formations and not particularly tracing, but actually copying, that certain networks that are associated to learning to read are being activated. So this psychologist, Karen James, did a study and showed that kids who were doing this kind of practice actually started learning their letters a lot sooner. And this also has wonderful ramifications further on, where other studies have shown that it helps the older children increase their working memory, meaning they are able to store a lot more ideas while they're trying to write, so they can produce a lot more of that content, which is really important, which is the other part we were saying of what writing is. So with our early writers, sometimes we just focus on the mechanics and not linking it to what the reading component is. So you might just say to your child, oh, I'm going to write the letter B. Instead of doing that, so tell them that it's associated with the sound and have them read the letter. This is also very important in helping your child with what we call like the mirror invariance, or the flipping of letters back to front, which you will see probably up to possibly first grade, but it's very normal. It's the brain that's trying to relearn a certain habit. So this is what I've done with one of my students, where we were working on the B and D reversal. And letter formation in this instance is very important. Like knowing where to start helps the child differentiate if it's a B or a D. So after we focused on the writing, I had him read it back to me. So you can just see him practice. So I was really excited after watching him do this, because we had focused on this, for about a couple of lessons. And when we do this activity, it really is just focused on that letter formation and then making that sound. So, people might think, oh, this isn't writing because they're not generating ideas, but this is one of the foundational steps to writing. That is making that association that our sounds, our spoken language is represented into a written component. So for parents out there, I encourage you to sit your child down and do these little handwriting exercises. There are great videos out there. I highly recommend starting with lowercase letters because majority of what we read is in lowercase. However, there are arguments that it's easier for kids to do straight lines first. That's why they do uppercases. But I've worked with pre-K students who have been able to do it. We've just said to them, make it bigger, and just a lot of practice. Stop. As children get more confident or their repertoire of letter sound correspondence expands, they're ready to start doing that sound spelling. So they are trying to sound out that word and recall what the letter is that represented. So just like the first video I showed you where you saw the kid going Power Rangers, he's really trying to hear those sounds. At the beginning, they will probably only hear the consonant sounds, and that's okay. So don't just always see where your child is at and don't push them. So best thing a parent can do is model the sounding out as you write. So you can do it for them multiple times and saying, I'm going to write the sentence, I like cats, and really slow it down and show them how you're doing it. Then help them as they do it by stretching those sounds. Really think of it like a rubber band, or sometimes we call it turtle talk. Make it fun for the kids. Like really, there's also I think a clip on Nemo where they call it whale speak. So you tell the kids like speak like a whale and stretch all your words out. Make it fun, make it silly, and kids can get really excited about it. At this time where you notice that your child is making just those letter sound correspondences, it's important to just let the spelling be as it is. Sometimes we call it, you might have heard it as being invented spelling. So it's not the proper way of spelling, but to the child, it is correct. It's regular because they are writing down what they hear. So at this time, it's best to just leave it. No need to correct the spelling until perhaps later on in second grade when they're a lot more competent, and that's when the correction or the editing will come into place. So here are just some examples of what it might look like in like kindergarten or even late pre-K. This is one of my late pre-K students, but you can see that there are some vowels missing here, and only the consonants are there. So I go to the park when it is sunny. Now again, you might see here a letter reversal. I personally, depending, how the child did on this task, for some kids, this is a very difficult task. It's long and arduous. So I wouldn't then pick this out and go, oh, you flipped your letter over, you better, fix that up. I would just leave it, because here the idea is really for the child to get that concept out and put it down on paper. And then maybe later on another day, another time when they're fresh, you can go through and have them reread it and see if you can spot, oh, look, that letter was reversed. Why don't we practice it? And then do that as a separate handwriting practice. This is a sample of a first grader. I'm not sure if you can see it, read it, but he says, Jay and Tom were at Hawaii. Jay gets lost in Hawaii, and then so it's a little bit tricky to read. but for the child, it makes sense. So at this point, don't try to fix all the errors, because he or she's doing it to the best of their ability, and they're enjoying that process of just coming up with a story. And there's some, disjointed maybe ideas, but you have to think of your purpose. Do you want your kid to just enjoy getting those ideas out? Then if so, let them write freely, and then again later on go back and reread it and pick up one or two things to focus on. This is a sample of a child who's in second grade. So now at this stage, you can see the child's spelling has come a long way. She knows a lot more phonic rules, but there are still things that she perhaps has not been explicitly taught. This parent had told me that it was really challenging to have her the child write or enjoy writing. Even before she started, she felt so defeated. And one of the things I think the parent noticed was that she just found the spelling part so difficult. So she had these great ideas, but she found it so hard to keep up mechanically to write the words. And so we decided to just focus on spelling. We'll have a session where we just look at spelling patterns. And if there was some writing she had to do, I would actually have her dictate the ideas and I would write it down for her. Or I suggested to the parent, you can have her record herself telling those ideas and then going back to revisit. Because again, remember, writing is still a juggling act for a lot of them. They haven't mastered a lot of the skills yet. So when we get to the point where kids are showing more proficient spelling, some of the suggestions I have for parents is ask your school if there is a spelling curriculum, because just like reading and spelling, writing, they're all linked. And kids need to be taught explicitly certain spelling patterns. So if they're not getting it at school, then maybe it's something you need to do at home. Pay attention to the word lists that your child receives. Are there certain sound patterns you notice they're working on? And then if you do notice that, you can apply that at home and help your child write sentences that feature those sound patterns. So that's a good way to tying in the school and home network. And as words get bigger, really help your child break up words into syllables. Just like before you were stretching them out with turtle talk, you can really clap and break down the words and model it for them again and just support them in that. But remember, go back to do that. If it's just about writing to get ideas out, don't worry so much yet. So that leaves us to that revise and editing. I would say when you reach this stage, choose only a few things to focus on. I just left this one sentence there because that's it. You don't want to overload your child and make them feel, oh, I thought I just did this beautiful piece of writing, but now you're telling me I did this wrong and that wrong and this wrong. Always be proud of make sure that they feel proud of what they've produced. And then go back in small periods and chunks of time to just look at certain things and say, oh, well, let's see if we can improve on this part. And that itself is good practice to help them, receive feedback. But always, be proud, help them, and make sure they are proud of what they've produced, because writing is hard at the end of the day, and we want to make sure that they don't lose that interest and it doesn't become a chore. So thank you for joining me. I might let Mary jump back on to close. I know to see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Sam. That was so amazing. I just want to reiterate that. I know we had a question or two. Actually, a couple of people wrote in just asking about that piece around correction. And I think we all as parents really want our kids to be able to produce writing that can communicate their ideas to the world, and really only through using proper English, in this case, conventions, can we really help them to do that? So of course, as parents, we see them writing as young children and we know that they won't be able to be understood as it stands, right? And so we want to jump in and we also want to teach them. So our urge is to sort of jump in and say, hey, you spell there this way, or you spell, partner this way, or, whatever have you. And I guess, I don't know how you feel, Sam, but I guess I would just say, I think it's going to all come in time for them most of the time in terms of them developing more of that sound letter correspondence and just the spelling skills and things of that kind. But I also think that it's okay if you want to target, like maybe you and your child make a deal and you say, I would love to be able to teach you how to spell one of these words. Like maybe you could teach me how to spell one of these words, right? And so maybe it's more of a game. So in other words, whenever you're working with a young child, I think as long as you guys are having fun and it's playful and it's really something that your child is engaged and happy about, that's really the activities you want to be engaging in. Like I know one of my children was really interested in spelling at one point. We sort of hit a stride around first grade where like he wanted to know everything and how to spell everything. And so, we kind of just jumped in and I was like, okay, like let's learn how to spell all these words. And we got one of those games that, you get the card with the picture and then you have to spell the word with the tiles. And he loved that one, for a long time. That's how he learned a lot of words, but he was really showing that readiness to me. And again, you can always partner with someone like Sam too. If you are not feeling it, like if there's some tension at home and you're worried and you're perhaps wanting to jump in and correct, but you're finding that you're not really sure what to do, that's also the way that we work with our families to help them with these kinds of tricky moments, really, right? So I hope that kind of answers the question in a loose form. So just, could you just go to the end slide? Because if people do want to connect with us, I think we have, Stephanie's email address is there. And so you can always email her if you'd like to book some time with Samantha. And I so appreciate your presentation, Sam. It was so good to see your students in action too. That's such a lovely piece. I know they're so wonderful and you're doing a great job with them. And we're so glad to have you today. So thank you so, so much everyone for coming. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Yes. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Sam. Talk to you soon.
See you later.